I spoke primarily about the need for a change in our overall approach to cyber risk. I think there is widespread agreement that there is a serious risk. I think many people, maybe most people, understand how incredibly serious it is. I refer to it as an existential threat, which there are very few risks that reach that level. It maybe is an overused word, but I think it's appropriate for cyber. And if you regard it as an existential threat, then it takes an answer which will take into account the magnitude of the risk. So I urged as a common theme 3 areas of enhanced cooperation, collaboration, and ultimately centralization, which is within the government itself, the government and the private sector, and within the private sector. The first part of that policy response, and this is really the key question, is to identify the magnitude of the threat, because if you don't understand how significant it is, you're never going to have the right policy. The second part of formulating the right policy is to have it led at the very top. The further down the policy setting is pushed, the least attention it gets, the less revenue it gets, the less person resources it gets. So that it really has to start at the top. Then there's got to be buy-in by all the relevant agencies, and there's an alphabet of agencies here. You have to insist on a buy-in and a commitment to work together. And then it is getting more granular, and that's identifying what the real risks are, having both the defensive capacity and the offensive capacity. I think there is definitely awareness. To a large extent, there's buy-in, even commitment, but there's not the ability to implement. And let me give what I think is one key example. I would say, with the exceptions of at most, the right and left fringes of the two parties, there is broad agreement across the political spectrum of the need for legislation. And as I said upstairs, even in an era where bipartisan is almost an internal oxymoron, there really is bipartisan buy-in here. But we have at least five bills in Congress. I think it's 3 in the House and 2 in the Senate. There is substantial consensus even on the specifics of the bills, but we're getting hung up on some, what I regard as more marginal issues. So again, buy-in, understanding, commitment, but really just some of the poisonous atmosphere in Washington making it difficult to get it done. And there is no question but that the Snowden affair has made a major difference, and a negative one. Snowden has managed, and certain publications have managed to perpetuate this myth of that the U.S. is doing something entirely different than any other country does, as if there has never been spying on any other country. All that has been really done is taking it from letterboxes and double agents and triple agents and moving it into an electronic age. It was a long time ago when, I think it was Secretary Stimson said, respectable people don't read other people's mails. At the same time, the U.S. government was doing it to Germany, and Germany to the U.S., and so on. So the spying is, I don't know how many centuries it goes back, but all that's changed is it's now electronic rather than in a different way. But this myth has grown up that the NSA was an agent just running unchecked. It had checks and balances, and what is interesting is that no one has been able to cite a single example, to my knowledge, of where there was an electronic eavesdropping on a U.S. citizen without all the proper precautions being followed. In my view, the policy framework is one in which there is very substantial information sharing without risk of liability, or except for where you clearly are violating either the law or widely accepted norms. And with that information and the processing, I think that we are able to detect and deter a lot of the cybercrime. It's never going to be perfect. I do think we need, and this will be a bit more controversial, we do need a retaliation policy, and that retaliation policy has to encompass an idea that there is no real distinction in a number of these cases between state actors and others, because that's too hazy a distinction. So that nation states have to understand that if they are harboring individuals, they are going to be held responsible.